So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this session of Tuesday Talks. My name is Chaitanya Mutpally and people call me Chai. And I'm the Associate Director of Laity Training at the California Nevada Conference of the United Methodist Church. Some of you who have been participating in these talks know what Tuesday Talks are. But for those of you who are here for the first time, let me briefly introduce you to these talks. So these talks are sponsored by the Lay Leadership Development Board and the Office of Leadership Development. And these talks, this is a new initiative that we started this year. Basically what it is an hour-long learning opportunity that we have every second Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. So the topics that we cover during these talks are primarily aimed at spiritual as well as intellectual development. So today's topic is slightly different. It is very contextual and which has ramifications for our local churches and for our lives too. So this is unique in its own way. The topic for today's session is what happened at the General Conference. So I know that there's so much that happened at the General Conference. And of course, within 1 hour, we cannot cover everything that happened. So what I have done is I have requested our panelists to share their reflections on two questions. Number one is, what are the things that happened at the General Conference that are significant for the United Methodist Church in general? And number two, what are the things that happened at the General Conference that are significant for the local church? So friends, we have quite an amazing group of panelists in our midst, and I'll give brief introductions and then request them to share a little bit more about themselves when they share their reflections. The first panelist is Reverend Elizabeth Brick, who is an ordained elder in our conference. She was a delegate at the General Conference and currently serves at Rancho Cordova United Methodist Church. I'm profoundly grateful to say that she is my pastor. So the second panelist for this afternoon is Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Kwon. He holds the distinction of being the first elected clergy delegate to the General Conference. He's an ordained elder in our conference and appointed to Extension Ministry as a professor of Hebrew Bible at the Claremont School of Theology. He's also the president emeritus of the same school. Both Reverend Elizabeth and Reverend Jeffrey have been delegates to the General Conference a few times. Before I go to our third panelist, I want to mention that yesterday, around this time, I received an email from Dr. Randall Miller saying that he would not be able to attend this meeting because of another conflict that he had. So immediately I was in a panic mode. I called Reverend Jeffrey and he graciously accepted my request to be here. Thank you, Reverend Jeffrey, for being here. And I also want to add that it's Reverend Kwon, Hyok-In Kwon is unable to be present here because of a family emergency. So returning to our esteemed panelists, the final person I want to introduce is Micheal. She holds the distinction of being the first elected lay delegate to the General Conference and also served as the head of the delegation. In addition to her leadership roles within the conference as our lay leader and also the chair of the Lay Leadership Development Board, she serves as the CEO of Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay. So panelists, welcome to all of you. Before I hand it over to you, please know that each of you will have 10 minutes to share your reflections. And once you all finish your reflections, I will open the session for questions from the participants. The order we will go is the way I introduced you. So with that being said, I'll give it over to you, Reverend Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Chai. It is really an honor and a pleasure to be invited to share with all of you and to be with my co-delegates in this process. I love all of you and I'm happy to see you again. So together we had quite an experience in Charlotte, and there were many extraordinary and important things that happened there. You probably heard that we lifted all of the restrictive language out regarding the LGBTQIA folks. None of that is in our book of discipline anymore. We voted the first steps of regionalization, which I'm sure Jeffrey will share a lot more about, but I want to just say that that is an important step toward all of the United Methodist Church having more autonomy locally and regionally, that we might make policies and decisions about our lives that are contextual and significant. And there were so many, many things that happened beyond that. We adopted the revised social principles, which I hope every local church will study. They are beautiful. They are comprehensive. They are poetic. They're all of the things you would want your social principles to be. And I'm sorry, Randall can't be here to share more about that, but I know we'll hear more a little bit later. For me, one of the most important things that happened was our delegation was amazing. And I do mean amazing. We have been working together for a really long time. All of the delegations have been working together for a really long time. So we had the opportunity to really see the ways that we had envisioned ourselves as a delegation in practice. And that was a great gift. So when times came to maybe make a speech about something we felt passionate about, we worked together to create those speeches and to make things move forward in ways that we believed were productive and helpful. It was really hard that we didn't get to sit with our alternate delegates, or even where we could see our alternate delegates, because those people partnered with us, sat through committees with us in the first week. And they just were really there for us, the 6 seated delegates. I am the second clergy reserve delegate, not reserve, I'm the second elect clergy delegate. I'm used to being a reserve delegate, and 2019 was the first time I really served. And as you might know, 2019 was a really difficult general conference. And so it was shorter. There was only one issue on the table, and the outcome was really painful for someone like me who is openly gay and a part of the church. So to get to come back and have the 2020-2024 experience where everything really shifted for the entire denomination was extraordinary. I'm grateful for that. Some of the highlights, and I'm guessing Micheal is going to highlight this too, we did get to watch the passing of the gavel to the first African-American woman president of the Council of Bishops, which was a very monumental story and experience, I think, for everybody. Extremely moving. What else did we do that was, I mean, there were so many things. One of the things that was most moving to me, and probably one of the most important things we did, was issue an apology for all of the persons who have been harmed by sexual abuse and violence in the United Methodist Church by clergy and other leadership. And that apology, I hope we will read in our local churches and really take in and study and take some time to understand the damage and harm that has been done, but also the ways that we are called toward reconciliation and reparation and forgiveness. So that's a piece of it. I just feel so deeply, deeply privileged to have been able to vote on the floor for all of this conference. It was wonderful to be there. For me, I had a strange thing sort of put into my lap early on. One of our Council of Bishops invited me to bring some legislation to the floor. And I thought, oh, we'll do that in committee. And we started it in committee, but by the time we were done, it was the last act of the general conference, which on a stage that big was kind of terrifying for me. But it was also really incredible that that piece of legislation was an opportunity for clergy who have been or have left the church because of chargeable offenses, whether they were defrocked or otherwise left for things that are no longer chargeable offenses, would have a gracious pathway back to ministry and becoming clergy again in the United Methodist Church. And so it's my understanding that we adopted that after all of the all of the stress and waiting and making that happen. And so, you know, I feel very deeply privileged to have been chosen to do that work and to be a part of that work as well. One of the things I learned a great deal about was the legislative process. You kind of think, oh, you're going to read all these petitions, and if you see behind me the books, these are the books of petitions, and that you're going to go and you're going to discuss them in a group, and you're going to, vote on them in groups, and then you're going to bring them to the big floor and everybody's going to, either pass them or debate them. And it does kind of happen that way. But the other thing that was interesting to me about this was how behind the scenes there were so many other things happening. There were people really advocating for pieces of legislation, talking with people about the implications of that legislation. They were kind of, to have a bishop approach me with a piece of legislation that he felt needed to come forth, I had no idea that would happen or could happen even. And I know it does happen, but it was a really new way of understanding the ways that we are both a spiritual entity, all connected to each other from the top to the bottom, but also the ways that we are also a political entity, and we function in that way as well. So there was strategy and teamwork. There's also at General Conference, like a whole other conference happening that is not on the General Conference floor, and that's for observers and people who are coming to advocate for legislation or for issues. Lots of caucus groups are meeting. You see folks from every part of the globe gathered together, passionate about the church in some small or large way. Chai asked us to talk about the things that impact the local church. And what I would say about that is everything we did should have impact on the local church. In terms of the number of petitions that actually dealt with the local church, we're talking about 25 petitions. There weren't very many. And they were related to things like how we vote as a staff parish relations committee, how we define membership and the ways that we terminate membership for people who don't get in contact with us. They were very procedural. So in terms of the life of the local church, what we learn about our social principles will impact the local church. What we do when we are including more people will impact the local church. When the language is removed, I've already seen it in my own local church. People will come home. Stuff like that happens all the time. So everything we do at General Conference, in fact, does impact the local church. And it's a pleasure and a joy to see the ways that the structure can work, and some of the ways that the structure is a little bit unwieldy. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to my co-presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And again, Chai, thank you so much for the invitation. I was at the airport in Las Vegas on transit to Indianapolis. My phone rang. I don't recognize that number. But I decided that since it is a 916 number, it's Sacramento, I better pick up. And I happened to pick up the phone, and it was Chai and who extended the invitation to me. And so I'm glad to be on this panel with my dear friends and colleagues, Elizabeth and Micheal. General Conference. My first initial feeling after all the work that we have done is we finally have our church back. That was my immediate reaction. Having gone to General Conference since 2004 and serving on the delegation, this is my fifth General Conference. So I'm a veteran in General Conference and all the legislative work and maneuvering that goes on. And having felt that we were losing the church from 2004, and the worst was 2019. When the traditionalist plan was passed, we felt that the church had gone very far, and whether or not there will continue to be a place for us. And having remembered that that paragraph 2553, the disaffiliation paragraph, was actually put forward and passed to provide an exit for progressive progressive conferences, progressive churches, like ours, primarily in the Western jurisdiction and in other parts of the country. And then to go to General Conference, the postponed General Conference of 2020 and the General Conference 2024, and to be able to get all the work that we were planning for all passed. That, as I've said, that was the feeling that we have got our church back. We lost a fraction of the denomination. 25% of our churches in the US disaffiliated. But in the global context, that likely amount to about 10-15% of the denomination. So to be able to say that we have our church back, and mostly the majority of the church had remained, is one of the greatest feeling that I had, having gone to so many general conferences, and at the end of the general conference, each general conference previous to that, the Western jurisdiction will huddle and cry over it. This time we shed a lot of tears, but it was tears of joy and celebration that we have made we have fought very hard for a church that is open, welcoming, inclusive, and working toward equality, as well as a decolonial church where the US would no longer be the center and the central conferences the periphery. That's the new church that we are building toward, and I cannot be happier to keep talking about that. And I wish I have an hour to keep talking about what we have achieved. That was very, very significant. And to have all the language, every single one of the harmful language removed. And to do that by consent calendar with an overwhelming majority was very significant. You have probably read in the Western jurisdiction news that I yielded my seat to Christine Stoneking, the Reverend Dr. Christine Stoneking, so that she could be in there to cast that vote. For me, it was a small role that I play that enabled the church to be an inclusive church, and out of love and respect for my queer siblings who have worked so hard for so long to have this kind of church moving forward. That was a very important thing to me, and I did not even have to second guess myself not being in there to cast that vote, because it was an important day for the United Methodist Church. And Elizabeth had talked about the new revised social principles. And one of the most important part of the new revised social principle is the definition of marriage. We knew that there is going to be the one issue that we are going to have some debate on the floor. The beauty of that is that the debate did not last very long, because as we were in the debate, a delegate from Zimbabwe, a Supreme Court justice from Zimbabwe, who had already been elected to serve on our United Methodist Judicial Council, stepped forward and provided a definition that will allow different parts of the world to decide which of the definition they want to use. And so the language of the union between a man and a woman, or between two people of faith, both are in the social principle. and we can adapt it in our context in the United States, or even the different groups, different people of different theological persuasion within the theological spectrum can decide on which one of the definition they can use. And that was the beauty of the work that we have done. And it could not have come better from anyone else except from a delegate who is a much respected jurist from Zimbabwe that offered that definition that was very quickly approved by the General Conference, and overwhelmingly. So that was the work. In many ways, that was the work of the Spirit. And we have always said that we can never undermine the work of the Holy Spirit when we are in holy conferencing. And that was the first time I have experienced in my 20 years of a general conference where we are entering into holy conference. So the revised standard, new revised social principles was very significant. And the other thing is that Elizabeth mentioned that I would talk about is the worldwide regionalization. Why is that so important? That reduces the centrality of the US as the center of United Methodism and create a new church where all the different regions will have parity and equity throughout the entire denomination. But it will now also, once this is ratified within this next year, it will also allow the US to be able to contextualize our ministry, given our different contexts, and allow us to move in new directions in terms of how we want to, we are called to do ministry in a very different culture than it is in the Philippines or in the continent of Africa or in Europe. And for us to continue to move forward to become a decolonial church, a church that is going to address our, even more so, our own issues of racism, sexism, homophobia, so on and so forth. The road to worldwide regionalization is not over. We have the work of ratification that we will still be doing. I want also to mention that the disaffiliation is ended. The traditionalists were associated with the WCA, the Good News, the Global Methodist Church was still trying to get this affiliation. But it was the central conferences that came to us and told us that they do not want this affiliation because they know this is going to be very disruptive for their contexts. So we voted out this affiliation. We did not pass any new disaffiliation petitions. On the other hand, we voted on re-affiliation for churches that have left and who eventually would want to come back to be part of the United Methodist family. And so that was done. And the person who spoke passionately about creating the path toward re-affiliation is none other than Helen Wright, who has been active in the staff in the Reconciling Ministry Network. And as a gay person, she spoke passionately about not disenfranchising for people to a people who had been in the way that she had been disenfranchised. And so that was another very powerful moment. Finally, I know my time is running out. Let me also mention that for those who are deacons, we voted on sacramental authority for deacons. And I felt, as an elder, I felt that that is the right thing to do. And I have been passionate about this and had spoken about this because it is theologically sound to grant sacramental authority to deacons. There's so much I can say, but one last word. All this could not have happened without the building of a big coalition that started after General Conference in 2019. And this coalition worked very hard, not only in the US, but connecting with Central Conference siblings in the continent of Africa, in Philippines, and in Europe. And this allowed us to now move forward to become the church that we felt God has called us to be. Thank you. Sister Micheal?
Thank you, Brother Jeffrey and Sister Elizabeth. I love hearing their perspectives of the General Conference because we worked so hard for 4 years trying to come together as a team to really help those of us like myself, where it was my first time at a General Conference in a delegate role. I attended the the bad one as an observer, and just saw the pain that caused for so many people. I held many people in the hallway who I didn't even know, just because of the pain that they walked away with and the isolation and oppression of the decision of that General Conference. I want to speak to, as it relates to the general, to the bigger picture. There's a couple of things that really touched my heart. One was watching Tracy Malone, Bishop Tracy Malone, take that gavel as the first Black woman bishop to become a head of the college. That I love her, she is a friend, but more importantly, I know that it was right that the church has existed for so many years, speaking to diversity and inclusion and just not really truly living into it 100%. And that was like a mark of yes, we can, when we really move from the structure that we have become accustomed to and put something or someone different in that leadership role. So Bishop Tracy Malone was a big event for me. Also, seeing Angela Brown, a member of our conference, be lifted up for judicial council, and how exciting that was for me to see her name go across the screen and the number of votes that it was a slam dunk, and so that was amazing. Seeing the love train going through the conference center of people from all over the world that take the mantle of the people of the United Methodist Church dancing, you hear me? Dancing and singing to Love Train was amazing to me, because we sometimes get so stiff in our faith that we don't allow the Holy Spirit to let us bust loose. And we busted loose with the Love Train because we were so excited that every person who recognizes themselves as a United Methodist from around the world that were there, that we worked together, we cried together, we argued together in our committee meetings, but we didn't hurt each other. We didn't oppress each other. We didn't talk about each other. We did the work, and what you saw in plenary was the outcome of that. I was a part of the Church and Society Committee too. We had over 178 pieces of work to look at and to consolidate or write amendments to or to argue over. A lot of it was social principle stuff. Some of it was aging. Some of it was dealt with children that are for working in places, creating some of the very fashions that we wear. That was an important part for me to see that all of that passed. Also, that our mission strategies, I want you to hear these mission strategies for the greater church, and I want you to think about our vision that we just decided to live into. Leading where God calls. Oh, is that following Jesus? I think so. The other is making new disciples in new places. Is that speaking to getting out of your churches and getting into the marketplace and bringing a new vision of hope to people who do not know the church and know God? I think so. Number 3, overcoming poverty together. So overcoming it, not just putting Band-Aids on it, overcoming it, meaning eradicating it from the construct of humanity, and that we as global churches and churches in the United States have committed to this. The other is seeking health and wholeness for all. This is about mental health. This is about helping people who are caregivers. This is about walking beside our youth and young adults when they're worried about who they want to be when they grow up, and that we're there, not to pick at them, not to judge them, but to bring them and to help them to seek health and wholeness through the Spirit of Jesus Christ. And then from the floor, I love it, love it, love it. From the floor, at the last minute, somebody stood up and said, we need to add a 5th mission strategy. And I was a part of the conversation, and a few other folks, and we were like, okay, this is missing, this is missing. And I didn't want to be the person to get up and talk about it. Once you hear what it is, we felt that it was better for a young person to get up and speak on it, and also not a Black person. And it's the eradication of racism was added as a mission strategy for the United Methodist Church and for the people who call themselves Methodists. Those 5 strategies speak very clearly to the vision statement that we have adopted in our conference. So for the greater church, I think we have some great work to do, but I also think we're going to be able to do it in a way where we're getting rid of things. I love the word eradication. Okay, I just think that's the most fabulous word. When I had acne, I didn't want to get rid of it. I wanted to eradicate it. So eradicating is following Jesus, thriving in community, and healing the world. So I feel that. Also, what I loved was being able to put on my interpreter earplugs and listening to siblings from all over the world speak their mind and feel a sense of relief that we had voted on regionalization. It's not that we're saying we're walking away from those churches across the pond, across the ocean. No, that is really not true. But what we're doing is creating a space for ministry and a space for worshiping together, and that our rules here in the United States cannot dictate any longer how people in other countries live into their faith. That was a great moment for me, a phenomenal moment for me. And I have to say, turning around with a little bit of African blood that I have combined with Native blood and to turn around and see our African brothers and siblings wearing their national colors, man, they were powerful. They were powerful. And Jeffrey has taught me so much because of his time traveling the world and seeing all of these things develop. And I have to take privilege to thank him. We co-led the delegation together. And we did it truly from a space of love, not only for each other, but for this conference. And then we added, you added, as you voted in other delegates, we became a bigger family. But one thing that Jeffrey and I was committed to at the General Conference, the reserves did get every single reserve who wanted to sit in the plenary and to vote and to be a part of it, got an opportunity to do that. We heard from other delegations that, oh, wow, we didn't do really well at that. Cal Nevada's got it. We were like, yeah, because everybody got a chance. I also want to lift up Michael Sue, who was the young adult among us, who worked with Stacy and Elizabeth when it came to the finances of the conference, of our church rather. And when he stood up, he was nervous. I heard them wordsmithing everything and getting it all done. And when he stood up and turned on his phone and he started to speak, I was the proud mama. and just proud that we had a young adult that was engaged and courageous to stand up and say, I disagree, or we disagree, and this is a option that we want to give you. So that's for the general church. For the local church, what I feel really now is the arguments are over. The separation needs to be over. The oppression is over. And now we need to dream like Jesus and sit in our staff parish rooms or whatever room ours. We have many rooms at my church that we can sit in, but sit in those spaces. And instead of pointing finger at each other and being angry with each other, let's try to live into a space where people who have looked at us and not wanted to join our club will now look at us and say, those are true followers of Christ. One of the moments, lastly, that touched my heart so deeply was when the language was taken away. My daughter and my son texted me and said, we can come back now. And I felt so good that I was there to make it possible for my children to grow up in the church that I have given all my life to, that I have served. Now they're willing to come back. And other young people who text me right away and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. The young woman who spoke at General Conference who said, we're not all these generational things, we're people coming together to build a church. I wrote that down. I've been in contact with her because she was powerful. So I'm still emotional about General Conference. As you can see, there's tears rolling down my face now. But I'm excited and I'm on fire with the Holy Spirit to make this a possible dream within our conference. And so what I'm going to say to you, did you get your ticket for the love train yet? You still got time to go buy one. Get your ticket for the love train and follow the conductor. The conductor is Jesus Christ with the steam of the Holy Spirit. And we can do all things in Jesus' name. And thank you for this time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pastor Elizabeth and Pastor Jeffrey and Micheal. Thank you for sharing your reflections, so profound and so deep. Thank you. Before we move into the question and answer session, the way we want to do it is at the bottom of your screen, there is a reactions icon. When you click on it, there is a raise your hand feature. So if you have a question, please use that. But as you think about it, I would like to give this time to Reverend Elizabeth to have a quick word before we have the questions.
You know, for all of the things we did, and we did some amazing, amazing things, as you heard, and they bring tears to my eyes as well. Thank you, both Micheal and Jeffrey, for reminding me that gut wonderfulness of what happened. But I also realized there were a couple of things that we failed to do, and I want to acknowledge those. And one of them that I think is most significant in our annual conference is that we failed to vote on voting rights for licensed local pastors. And that meant that those petitions and everything related to voting got referred, as far as I know, to a committee to have a discussion about it and bring it back to us at the next general conference. But for a lot of our lay people who serve as local pastors and who do it selflessly for very little money and with a great deal of faith, it was really devastating for them to learn that they would not have voting rights for another period of time. And so I want to acknowledge that, because I feel like that was a real failure on the part of the general conference. And the other piece was there were some people, especially from our conference, like Sharon Delgado, who are very invested in us, the United Methodist Church, divesting from fossil fuels and some of the other environmental maladies of our time. And so both of those issues kind of got sidelined for the other things we did. And I recognize you can't always do everything. But I do think the steps we have made have turned the ship in the right direction so that we will be making some very significant changes in our future. And so I just wanted to acknowledge those two things, because we can toot our own horns all we want, but we always find ourselves either not with enough time to do the work or choosing our priorities in a different order than maybe other people would prefer. So thank you. Thanks for letting me have that moment.
Thank you, Pastor Elizabeth. Friends, this is the time. If you have any question, please use it. Raise your hand feature, and I'll call upon you if you have a question. So as people are doing that, Pastor Elizabeth, what are those books behind you?
So this is called the ADCA. This is the third volume of the ADCA. You'll notice I have tabs, or if you can see them, tabs in each of the committees. These are the petitions we considered. And there are literally 1,000+ petitions that were divided up into committees, and those committees were, I can actually read you the committees, so I read all of them, so you know what we did, or who was who and what was what. The legislative committees were the legislative conferences, church and society. Church and society is where Micheal sat, and there were 3 different categories of church and society. So there were 3 church and society committees: discipleship, financial administration, faith and order, general administration, global ministries, the standing committee on central conference matters, independent commissions, judicial administration, local church legislation, higher education and superintendency, Jeffrey, were you higher education and superintendency? Is that right? Yeah, and I sat with the ordained ministry legislative committee. And so some changes were made to our practices related to the details of ordination, which those are weeds I'm not going to wade into right now. But for sure, so those are the books. And then those are advanced DCAs. And this is the DCA, the Daily Christian Advocate. And so every day of general conference, we are issued a book that we have to familiarize ourselves with. It contains the consent calendar, the reports from various committees, other actions, the regular calendar. And I will say we were honored to have the conference. So Emily Allen, who is our beloved Emily, was the one who created with a committee every day's agenda. So she was the agenda chair for the entire general conference, which is just huge. And we were so grateful and glad to see her up there. So yeah, these books are pretty unwieldy. Imagine packing this, and this in your suitcase for a 2-week trip. This is what we did.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor.
I never packed those because
you're so smart, Jeffrey.
It's all I only use the electronic version.
Yeah.
The total number of petitions is 1,009, almost 1,100, and this general conference is different from previous general conferences. Those of you who have been to previous general conferences, the committees are not pressured to process all the petitions. So in the past, a lot of petitions died in committee, but with the rules change, each committee has to process every single petition and vote up or down on every single petition. And the general conference plenary must vote up or down on any single petition. And so toward the last day, we were scrambling. And we were fortunate that we were able to not only table, but refer the remaining petitions to different groups, primarily the general agencies. So the general conference did all the work that it was asked to do.
I just want to make a shout out too to the collaboration with the Western jurisdiction, our partners, our other delegates throughout different conferences within the Western jurisdiction. Again, I did not go to the mic for any legislation pieces, but I was working with folks behind the scenes, really lifting up. And one of the things that we did lift up, Mark Stevenson from CalPAC and I, and LaToya Thompson from Mississippi, we worked on the fact that in our book of discipline, most positions, most stuff is 1/3 clergy, 1/3 laity, 1/3 women, 1/3, it's a 1/3, and it means to create diversity. And one of the things that we did see in the College of Bishops and in the judicial system is it was not that way. And we were instrumental in going to Don and what's his name? General Secretary Aurora Arroyo, to say, this is not right. The names are great, the people are great, but we're still not quite there. We also asked them to stop lumping everybody under the category of Black, meaning our African brothers and siblings, and then those that choose to show those who are Black Americans. And so that they are going to be doing that going forward, where it will say Black African or Black American, because there is a difference. When it says Black and the total looks so big, I thought to myself, that's not true. And then when I found out they were lumping our brothers and sisters from Africa in that number, I asked that LaToya and I asked that they discontinue doing that, so we can really see as the United States where we stand in having brown and Black people in our leadership, whether they be clergy or laity. So that was another big piece of legislation that we worked on.
Chai,
Yeah.
let me also
Please.
make a quick point about why regionalization is so important.
Mm-hmm.
We spend a lot of time at every general conference, spending time dealing with US specific matters. Our pension took on a lot of time. And there are many other issues where it has nothing to do with our siblings in other parts of the world. With regionalization, now a lot of these issues like pension, like U.S. having a specific number of bishops, so on and so forth, those can all be addressed at our regional conference rather than taking up all the time of everybody sitting through, not knowing why this is even relevant to them.
Yeah, I think he froze.
Yeah.
Reverend Myrna.
Reverend Jeffrey, you're back now, but we lost you for a minute. Reverend Jeffrey, you're muted.
I'm good.
Okay.
I just
So
want
friends,
to make sure that you understand the significance of why regionalization is important for those of us in the US, but also for the rest of United Methodism around the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Reverend Jeffrey. So we have a hand up, Reverend Myrna. Please go ahead. And also I want to mention that there's a question in the question and answer box too. Please look at that. Reverend Myrna, please go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chai. This is maybe following up on what you were just saying, Jeffrey. Can you, maybe all three of you can say, so we're going to have a general discipline and then there's going to be smaller ones. And can you explain a little, can you say a little bit more about that? And I'm assuming everything goes into effect. Is it January 1, 2025 or just what will be? Yeah, can you explain how that's?
I think Jeffrey can best explain that, but one of the things that I will add real quickly is that our European, Filipino, and African siblings have already had their own book of discipline. So that was already something that they were living into, and then I'm going to throw it over to Jeffrey to take it from there.
Actually, I want to say a quick word, which is some of the legislation is actually currently and already in practice. And those petitions actually said in them to, take effect the day after we adjourn. So those petitions are clear in the books. You'll have to kind of do a little bit of a diving into the petitions that were adopted to figure out which ones those are, because we don't have a comprehensive list yet. But I'm going to let Jeffrey answer the bulk of that question.
Yeah, you're right, Myrna. We have been working on a general book of discipline. The Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters have been invested with the project for a long time. And this general conference that, because of regionalization and disaffiliation, that project was in some ways put on hold until after this general conference. We have brought that to our annual conference sessions too for conversations. Groups have been discussing on that. There will be a new round of conversations that Sister Micheal and I will be convening throughout our annual conference. Once regionalization is ratified, what it means is that there will still be a general book of discipline. But beyond the general book of discipline, there are sections that cannot be adapted, like our articles of religion, and there are several parts that are non-adaptable. But the adaptable part, dealing with, for example, credentials for ministry, whether or not we all need the MDiv, all the different parts of the world have their own, will adapt to their own contexts. So there will be adaptable parts of the Book of Discipline, and the US as a regional conference can begin to adapt what is necessary within the adaptable parts of the Book of Discipline too. So all that is on the horizon. We are hoping that this new quadrennium starting in 2025 will finally finish the entire general book of discipline to go to the general conference in 2028.
And to follow up real quickly, sorry to interrupt, and who will be writing our regional book of discipline?
Our regional book of discipline, at the convening of our regional conference, there will be petitions. We will still go through the same kind of processes to adapt what we need to adapt. That has been going on in all the central conferences for decades and decades. But now, for the first time, the US will have the opportunity to do that kind of process ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeffrey, that's great, because that made me think of the Congo. You know, when we say the Congo, when I learned, they definitely let me know there's no such thing as the Congo. There's different pieces of the Congo, and everybody does things differently from north, west, east. So it's also our language. What, you know, was very colonizing when we used it in the past, and we learned a lot. I know I did, being with our siblings.
And thank you for pointing that out, Sister Micheal, because in the continent of Africa, there are 3 central conferences. There will be a 4th central conference. Each of the central conference can adapt in a way that best fit their own context. So it doesn't mean that the entire Africa has to work with the one book of discipline, their book of discipline. No, every regional conference can begin to adapt their own book of discipline.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Would any of you like to respond to the question in the Q&A? If you don't see it, the question is this: can church funds now be used to promote homosexuality? And a secondary question is, are we supporting Israel in ways other than by supplying military aid? In any way relevant, based on your experience about from your general conference experience?
I'm happy to talk about the funding ban. We did lift the funding ban. I would not say that the ideal use of those funds is to promote homosexuality, but I would say that the use of those funds can be now used to do HIV and AIDS education for LGBTQIA folks, can be certainly used for local church and annual conference ministries that are related to the LGBTQIA+ community. And so you might use the word promote, but I don't think that's either the intent of the funding, of lifting the funding ban or otherwise, but rather that we might have opportunities to fund ministries that are relevant to the LGBTQIA community. So thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You're muted, Jeffrey.
What it means is after this general conference, their funds can be used for ministry to all people. That is very, very important. And in fact, the language that was put in there was very offensive. What do we mean by promoting homosexuality? That's very harmful language. And what we have done in removing all these restrictions is to acknowledge that every one of us is created in the image of God, period. No exception. And with the removal of all the restrictions, pastors can do weddings the way that they feel called to do without having to worry that the charges will be brought against them. So this is important for the ministry of the local churches, for all our pastors to be able to live into their call the way that they have felt called to do.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think this might be the last question. Gail, please go ahead. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Those were my questions. And the reason I asked them was because somebody handed me a fact sheet from something called peopleneedjesus.net. And those were questions that came up right off of that fact sheet and things that people were discussing in my church. And so I wanted to know how to answer that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Gail. So any other final, any final question from our participants? Yes, Mary.
I do, and I thank you for all the delegates and the great work that you did. I do realize that we are also a diverse conference, and there may be some churches and communities that may need some interpretation because of what Gail mentioned. Like there are perhaps fake news going out, regarding what the decisions are and what it means. And so I wonder if there's some effort, to help interpret. I think this is a great forum. I just wish more people were here, but it's a great start. So any thoughts?
Mary, I think that's a very important point, and I hope that that conversation will begin at annual conference sessions, at our annual conference session. But I also hope that in the next year, district events will focus on what the implication of all this will have on local church ministries.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The Lay Leadership Development Board is going to take this on to work with our cabinet to have district gatherings of explanation and conversation and learning, because again, just because we change the language, we now have to change the language of our hearts. And that's going to take a little bit more time and not a vote. It's going to take knowledge and information, and more importantly, love for each other. So yes, Mary.
Yeah. Thank you. Friends, it's 12:59, so I think this is the time we should end this meeting. But first of all, panelists, thank you so much for sharing your reflections and experiences of the General Conference. It was inspiring to listen to you all this afternoon. And thank you so much for all the sleepless nights and the long days that you have spent at the General Conference for making the UMC what it ought to be. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And all of you participants, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And I will, as I shared with somebody, I will post the recording of this video on the website, and please share with your church members. And one last thing I'll say is that we will be on hiatus for the month of June due to the annual conference. So we will not have Tuesday Talks in June. Hope to see all of you, or as many of you as at the annual conference in June. So with that being said, thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Blessings, everyone.
Thank you, Chai.
Thank you, Chai. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you
Micheal.
all. Thank you,
Really
Chai.
nice to see you.
Mhm.
Thank you.